We have got a dramatic weather setup over the next couple of weeks. Warm, cold, and I think we get pretty chilly heading into January, and some of that could be in different parts of the country too. In this video, we're going to look at the long term. We're going to talk about why I think it's going to get cold. We've got this huge Pacific jet. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to talk about some of the big global players that are playing a part in what the weather is going to be like heading into January. Hey, if it's your first time over on the channel, thanks guys. I'm Travis. I used to be a chief meteorologist many years ago on television, but I've been out of that business, and now we're doing these forecasts here on YouTube. This is new. Looking way down the road, every day I put out a daily forecast video that gives you an update around the country. But let's just get into why you're here, and that's the long-range outlook. And take all of this and throw it in the trash if you want to, but I'm going to show you some of the players and give you my opinion as to what I think. So if you don't want to hear that, good to see you today. If you want to stick around, let's get into it. Cold air across the east. We've got this Pacific flow that I was talking about. Check it out. You can clearly see how it invades North America. Now we're bringing in that Pacific air mass here into parts of Canada, so temperatures will warm up as a result. All your cold air gets locked up here as we head toward the 27th, 28th, 29th. But look, how about this? Some changes. There you go. You're starting to see it as we head toward the new year. And I think once we get past the 2nd, 3rd, 4th of January, it gets really cold. Someone actually asked me in the comments, I always love reading the comments, by the way. Let me know what you think is going to happen down below. If you just want to leave a comment, that's fine too. But someone was asking about the sudden stratospheric warming. And right now, check this out. This is actually cold across North America. So this is not what you want to see. It makes sense too, right? We're going to get really warm heading into the week of Christmas that's coming up. And I'm telling you, this is a tightly wound polar vortex. I mean, the stratosphere is warming up here off the west coast, I should say, of North America. But what you don't see is this big warming happening right in here, or maybe even back in here some. There's some warming trying to show up in the modeling as we head toward the 29th and 30th. I don't know that it's a big difference from what we've seen though. And in fact, if anything, I think we've got more of the same. We do see some warming here, but as we head toward the end of this model run, look, boom, tightens back up, and that would mean temperatures probably going to warm up back in the east again later in January. Usually it takes a while for the weather to reflect what you're seeing in the stratosphere. All right, let's go back down to the troposphere where we live here and where the sensible weather is. We've got some snow moving through the northeast into the Great Lakes. I'm not going to get into detail of every system moving across the country. I'll save that for the daily forecast. In this video, we're looking at the long range. Another big storm across the west. I think that sticks around with showers here across the south, kind of a wet, soggy Christmas day, and there could be some snow into the Rockies. And the next storm looks pretty significant, and we're going to see that continue across the west with those storms slamming into the northwest with rain and snow here, and it could be heavy. This is where things get kind of weird on the European. If you think the European is weird, wait till I show you the GFS in a moment. And what I want to concentrate on is this pattern change. Do we see pieces of energy somewhere? I mean, I'm certainly not going to tell you on the 31st, we're going to get a snowstorm up to Chicago, into Milwaukee, into the UP of Michigan. Now, this will be completely different. Sometimes people get model guidance confused with deterministic forecasts. It will snow, it will not snow. That's not what we're looking at. We are just looking at the trends now, and the trend, in my opinion, is as we turn cold, we get stormy. Let's look at the GFS, because if you really want to see crazy things, and by the way, the GFS has huge feedback problems once you get out in time, so really past next Saturday. But the trend that I'm looking at, I mean, there's maybe a storm kind of similar to the European, right? You've got your colder air moving in, boom, kind of sort of in this part of the world, something around the 1st. It's a little bit slower. And beyond that, if you went back to the midday run, it still had a storm moving through this area with your trough digging in like this, and then it did something funky. This is where the GFS just goes off the rails. No way. We're not getting a snowstorm in Texas. Watch me be wrong. But I'll tell you what, the pattern, if you're going to see something, I mean, you start to turn cold here toward January, at least the long-range signals that I'm seeing, we're looking stormier heading towards the 1st of January. And this is just one tool we use. The Arctic oscillation is usually positive when you have a strong polar vortex, and that keeps the cold air locked up into Canada around the North Pole, and that's what we're seeing. But look what happens. We go negative with that as we start to warm up around the North Pole. We see some of that being reflected in the European ensembles. I mean, this is where we are right now. Decently strong polar vortex here, right, especially back over here across Siberia. You can kind of see your flow here like this. It's kind of messed up, but it's going in this direction around the North Pole and across of the United States, also into Europe. Usually fairly warm when you see this type of setup, but there are changes and they're subtle. First, you start to see your Atlantic oscillation go negative. You get some ridging up here into Greenland, and that usually translates to a cold Europe and a cold East Coast. And that's kind of what we're seeing as we head toward the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. This is classic. This is just textbook right here with your ridging up across Alaska. And now you're developing some polar flow coming right out of the north into the northeast. And I think this turns cold into Texas because it looks like some of that will shift back to the west. When you really take the North Atlantic Oscillation out, and by the way, this is the warm phase, and when it goes negative, it's cold. This is your median, if you will, but look what the control run does. I mean, this is the, it goes crazy ballistic with the cold. So when I see all of this, it just makes me go, you know what? We probably are going to be cold in January and maybe even beyond that. So I want to show you temperature-wise. This is pretty easy to understand. Clearly, over the next 7 days, warm up here into Canada, also a lot of the country above average. These will be the 7 days before the date on the timestamp. So this would be 7 days before December 30th. I'm going to take it out into January now. Let's go up to January 7th. So this would be January 1st through the 7th. Look at this pattern. I want to tell you, this is exactly what we're looking at right now, December so far. And that's why I'm kind of wondering, as we get toward the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, in this part of the country with that strong northwest flow, do we set up a pattern almost like what we've seen so far in December? I would almost argue yes. That would just mean cold Arctic air masses with these clipper systems that drop in that bring snow to the northeast and the Great Lakes. Does it change up a little bit? That's the question. I think it might. As we head toward the middle of the month, some of that might actually start to back to the west. These were your temperature departures the 17th, so this will be the 10th through the 17th. And then look at this. The long-term European weeklies are trying to hint at almost a repeat of what we're seeing in December with a real warming trend up toward the Hudson Bay. That would put the U.S. pretty warm. And then, boom, as we head into February, the bottom dropping out across the central and west. This, in my opinion, is the setup you would need to get your big Central Plains and East Coast snowstorm. So there you go. This is pushing the European weeklies out through the next 32 days. I'm not interested in exactly where this snow is, but look at where the heavier snows are concentrated, right? Right here into the northeast and across the west, and especially into the northwest with that Pacific flow, right? You're ridging here, and there's your northwest flow with your clippers. And, when you look at the upper levels too, some of your troughing, again, a little bit further to the west, may change how some of this looks, especially into February. All right, that's all I got for now. This is not the daily forecast video. That is right here in front of my face. This is the one from today, or at least the most recent. If you've not checked that out, we dive into every section of the country. I try to cover everyone. If you've not seen it, I'll see you there.